Of all the Pequod crew, only Ahab survives. What will she do next? Covered in blood from the previous battle, Ishmael told Ahab that she could have given her crew a chance to see for themselves where they stood, further incensed by her making that decision for them. Ahab saw that there's always pallid, opaque traces in her wake. She asked if she stole their chances. She saw Ishmael as wrong. They followed in her wake, setting their course to the same destination as hers. Then a blinding flash of light occurred, and she continued saying that because they had not done so, they couldn't have entered that world, because they were weak. She was their lighthouse in that world of tempest. She gave them an unambiguous path to follow. She then emerged differently, although it would take a little more time for the others to have their vision fully come back. She ordered the last of her sailors. By her, heed her orders, pursue them. It was then revealed that Ahab manifested the gas harpoon Egeo, which has a similar palladification as she had earlier, but it's now more stable. A reflection of how alive she was to the pallid whale. It was a weapon that appeared to be fueled by souls, specifically the souls of Pip, Starbuck, and Queequeg. I suspect that, in this case, there was no conversation with Carmen this time, where this time she was probably trying to get through to Ahab during that speech, where she was so open about her own self-belief and with her being so psychotic that Carmen held up her figuratively speaking hands and moved away shouting, "This, I'm out of here. She won't let me get a word in, and even if I did talk to her, she'd be more annoying than Virgilius. She doesn't deserve my gift." As for what happens next, she asks if Ishmael still fails to see. They are already Ahab. They are her harpoons. Her hatred is their hatred. Their vengeance is their vengeance. And her harpoons shall be defined, and will not be defied. Pip's soul spoke. He was laughing in a deranged way. Ishmael asked if Stubb's death did that to him. Ahab didn't believe that Stubb was dead. Pip would have said as such. He crushed his own heart and gave himself to her, so that he would be freed from his guilt, telling her to not be so cruel to a child, to cast her eyes on her. His broken heart led him to her. He was freed from his guilt by her. What did Ishmael do? Nothing. Telling her that the least she could have done was to row in Pip's place on that fateful day, seeing the fault as lying with her. Gaslighting, more like you crushed Stubb's heart when he was turning into a mermaid. Due to your orders. The only one wanting to be free of any accountability, never mind guilt, is you, Ahab. One who is the true, cruel person to a child. Pip was assigned that position by you, a position that he was not ready for. due to being too young and not yet fully developed. I mean, you're expecting too much from someone like him at that point in his life. A life that you denied. During this phase of the battle, she's only as strong as there is Pip's ego. The less of it there is, the weaker she becomes. She can also affect her enemies with pallid noise, if she hits them, and can become weaker if she loses a clash, especially if her morale becomes low enough. And if it breaks, she gains a burst of strength and defense. Power and defense, to be more accurate. Although, this is difficult considering that she heals SP. Ironically, she is weak to piercing, and the harpoon takes the shape of something that can be used to pierce, and also be used as a blunt force weapon. After this soul has been used up, Ahab was forced to use a different soul, Starbucks. Ishmael knew that he was the only one who could challenge Ahab, so how could he? She didn't complete that, although I suspect that she was going to ask, how could he become someone that is basically Ahab's yes man? Ahab called Ishmael foolish upon asking this. According to Ahab, Starbuck was the first to kneel. It didn't matter how many waves a first mate has weathered. A first mate's station is still beneath the captain. He apparently blinded his eyes in that complacent belief that regardless of what paths they took out of his volition, believing that she'd lead them to his destination, asking Ishmael if she knew that he had sought a better path. Why didn't she help him see it, telling her that the fault lies with her again? Actually, Ahab, it's you who is wrong. You ground Starbuck down, turned his will into a fine consistency, and did more than turn his mind into a latte, making him blind to your will. Still blaming others for your actions. I actually pity you. With this soul loaded, the harpoon looks nastier with multiple smaller points, like a bunch of tridents fused together. This now focused on making the enemy bleed, and to focus the attacks on the specific targets. Although if Starbuck's ego is depleted, then she can get staggered. Although this was also the same with Pip. With this harpoon, she's purely piercing. And after this soul was used up, Ahab only had one more soul to use, that of Queequeg's. This would be especially painful for Ishmael, and that's before she is physically hit by it. Ishmael didn't want to let her go. Not her. Okay, either they were close friends, or they were... Well, it is implied that it's more socially acceptable in that world, so why not? Regardless, she's dead now, and being used against Ishmael and the rest of the damned dozen. Ahab told her that it was all because of her, telling her that this all happened because she dared to unearth her buried heart. Because she forced her broken heart into the open, seeing the falters lying with her, telling her to look at what she's done, watching her determination crumble, her conviction collapse, with her faith broken. The Pale claimed Queequeg. No, Ahab, you claimed Queequeg and are using her soul to fuel your EGO. You emotional parasite. You wouldn't know what it's like to truly care about another. Not at all. Certainly not besides yourself. And I doubt you ever would. With this impressive-looking harpoon, she was similar to the Starbuck configuration, except she could counterattack and receive a shield fueled by Queequeg's ego. Then during the fight against this version, an illusion was cast, where it was as if there was two Ishmaels. There was an Ishmael encased in a pale membrane, a version of her that ranted that she couldn't solve anything and she failed everything. All she managed was survival. Pathetically, like a wretch, hanging on to her dear friend's coffin. Ahab agreed with the illusion. She couldn't save anyone. Not her crew, not her friend, no one. Telling her that she'll give up again, because she's afraid. She'll give up even before she started. Now this agitated the damned dozen. One of them, likely Heathcliff, telling her to not listen to Ahab. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Dante told them that it's not Ishmael next to Ahab, or at least they wanted to, but Ishmael's words mattered more there. Her breathing was quick and shaking. She was deliberating. At the end of her deliberation, there was silence to this. Was she still contemplating, or did she think that Dante was wrong? It might be too soon. One of them told her that no one could make that decision in her stead. Not them. Sorry. Where was that? Oh yes. Not them, not Ahab. She can reach her own answers. She can find her own way. Now all this does is make her tighten her grip on her weapon arm. She swung her arm in determination, trying to focus, calling Ahab out on her bull, desiring to tear her mouth from ear to ear. This resulted in Ahab mocking her, asking what she's waiting for. Is she too weak to do it? This provocation made Ishmael rush towards Ahab. The answer still eluded Ishmael. Wrath might draw it off course. Although this strengthened Ishmael, healed her SP and made Ahab more vulnerable to damage. And when Ahab is badly beaten, she proclaims that she is the captain of that lake, of the city. She shall seize that beast's heart and sever the evil from its roots. She then fired her harpoon at Ishmael, who briefly changed into her own EGO and deflected the harpoon back at Ahab. I mean, it'd be like if Scorpion did his spear throw move, and just as he was about to say, or rather shout, out his iconic line, it'd be bouncing back at him. Which is what the harpoon did to Ahab. And Ahab was beaten. She had no more souls to use. Then Ishmael was back in her base form. She reflected on the pallid whale and Ahab. They forced their way into the cracks in hearts. As she's saying this, the pallidification was creeping up on her. Everyone has those cracks in the hearts. It's what makes us hesitate and waver. Confusion, loneliness, the anxiety of the unknown, the fear of knowing that the people and even the things you cherish will one day leave your side. They tightly choke these fragile, countless cracks in our hearts to the point of breaking. Before she knew it, those cracks in her heart were filled with a singular obsession, so much that she was suffocating. She remembered saying that she would kill Captain Ahab, the cause of all evils in the world that has brought her to that point. This caused the palidification to spread more, as this obsession had wrapped her so tightly and in so many impenetrable layers that she could no longer recognize the times she spent with anyone, and the choices she made. All of a sudden, the palidification covered her. She began to sink. Even her own memories, or even her own shape, was starting to fade into oblivion. She was lost. She didn't have any idea of where to go. Then we see an outline, a rather familiar one, the outline of Heathcliff on the outside, asking what she's doing in there, tearing through the palidification, telling her to come out. This surprised Ishmael, asking when did the palidification start. She didn't realise. Heathcliff told her that it was the same look on her from the moment that they first met. He thought that she'd suffocate and die any minute. Ishmael was still a little disoriented, but the crew were not so fortunate, as while their souls were freed, the pallid membrane was devouring them, Queequeg included. Ishmael apologized to Queequeg, being unable to save her. Queequeg told her, no, she was too late. Too late to think about what is right and what is wrong. To think for herself. Too late. Ishmael believed that she should have been more, and should have. Queequeg told her, your name, tell her, once more. Then we have a vision of the past, where Ishmael said that the Great Lake might be one of the worst places in the city, but it has a pretty sunset. Queequeg asks her name. What? Ishmael asked why she wanted to know this. Queequeg told her, because her hair color, she like it. Whales, when they die, they turn to the sun, and her hair color, sunset color. So when she throws her harpoon, whales turn to her. They can be good friends. She told her to call her Ishmael, which she also did in the present, when we snap back to reality. That was when Queequeg disintegrated. Thankfully, she didn't turn into a mermaid. Ishmael had enough in the way of psychological warfare as it was. Then Ishmael limped towards Ahab, who was on the ground, defeated. In her hand was the harpoon that she was preparing for this moment. Then Dante stepped in front of her. She made it clear that they were in her way again, asking them why they're doing this. Why do they keep getting in her way? Why do they even turn the clock back for her? Yes. Why do they turn the clock back for her? Even though they could selectively not do that. What do they get out of this? Why does pretending to be a good person help them feel better? Dante wants to know more about her, so they can find a path that doesn't go in circles. She was surprised, asking them if they even knew. Do they even know where they're going? Dante replied that they're constantly searching. Dante reflected that they might summon the flow of time to turn the hands of their clock, to find the paths for the endlessly wandering sinners, for those who are lost, so that they might not be lost. Dante then told her that they're all captains of their own hearts. They just happened to be sailing the same path, and sometimes they let each other take the helm. In the end, she's still the captain of her own ship. She has to steer her own path, telling her to not let go of her helm before the voyage is over, because they won't. Likely remembering what Queequeg said earlier about encouraging Ishmael to find her own path. Ishmael slowly approached Ahab, a grim shadow shrouding her face, who accused Ishmael of finally killing everyone, not leaving a single one of them alive. Ishmael told her that she's the last one. This made Ahab laugh like the maniac that she is. And this made Ahab believe that they were one and the same. The paths to their destinations both unclouded, believing any sacrifice, any amount of death, justified this as long as the mission was complete, as long as their targets were killed. Nothing else mattered. Then we saw a vision of the past, to a time before Ishmael was a sailor. One day she had a sudden epiphany. She was tired of living as she was, as an office drone, a corporate slave. However you want to put it, she didn't want to live like that anymore. And it was also revealed that she was from Marlin Portship. So she was going home in Act 2, where after aimlessly taking tests, earning certificates, finding a place in a nest, earning herself a good career, struggling in the endless competition, riving and thrashing every single day to be a feather of a wing so that she didn't fall behind. All she ended up doing was chaining herself to a desk job, just to make money. So one day, she decided to quit. When asked what she was going to do now, she didn't know, didn't care either. She wanted to leave that life behind, along with all those that tried to dissuade her from doing that. She wanted a different existence to that dreary one. She didn't know if she wanted to die or just wanted something new. She knew that she was fond of the waters, so if she was to die, she wanted to die near a body of water. So she looked for a job around that area. She found a job ad saying that sailors were being recruited for a whaling ship. This made her heart pound for the first time in her life. The only requirements were basic. Just to have an able body that doesn't suffer from motion-based nausea, which surprised Ishmael. Then Ahab spoke of another, where she needed to be generous enough to not whine while someone throws her a rag to clean above the ship. Ishmael asked, who was she talking to? And why she was talking to her. And Ahab told her that she's just an old salt who doesn't like how the solid earth felt against her one good leg, who saw whales as magnificent, yet mysterious monsters. Everyone flees screaming at the sight of them, but they give it a toothy grin and a wild guffaw. Ishmael spoke of how every morning that she woke, she wondered what it meant to live. That woman stood before the recruitment board as she had, but her sights were set on something beyond the lake's horizons. She might have only one leg that's made of flesh and blood, but she stood taller than anyone else. Ishmael then read that the ship was called the Pequod. That captain of that ship must be one lucky person. Yes, she said this not knowing that she was speaking to that captain. Ahab asked why she thinks that. Apparently, Ishmael wanted to be like Ahab. Ishmael noted that not a lot of sailors out there were willing to work for such a pittance. Apparently, sailing with that ship would get her a grade 9 fixer license for 8 association. And, well, Ahab saw that it wasn't a particularly easy job as well. And yes, Ishmael wanted to be like Ahab one day, to be someone facing a destiny of her own choosing, to have something to give it her all without hesitation. And this was before she found out that Ahab was a complete psycho that wouldn't hesitate to throw her and any one of her crew into the sacrificial furnace if it suited her plans. Back in the present, Ishmael grabbed her mace and then summoned her EGO. Ahab rejoiced, ordering her to break that heart open and impale her skull. As Ishmael was readying her weapon, Captain Ahab declared that she'll be Ahab forevermore. Ishmael then remembered that there was a time when she wanted to be like her, once she was her mermaid, devoured and overrisen by her beliefs, swimming towards a towering mad whale that wore her face. Because if she didn't know she could go on. Her years of aimless wandering, her loss of everyone precious to her, that she was the only one that survived, that, once she had a chance to get them back, she ended up killing them with her own hands. All that had to be her fault. It was the only way to make it bearable. Yes, all Ahab's fault, and then this was also before she saw that recruitment post. Then after she boarded the Pequod. Even after she joined Limbus Company. She never took the helm of her own ship. But she's now found her own compass. Ahab mocked her, as if a mere deckhand dared to speak of her own compass. And Ishmael was clearly speaking of Dante here, as, well, she described him as an as an incredibly annoying compass that keeps getting in her way. But they're one that, even as they waver, points to where she wants to go. She wants to go on an adventure with that compass, a real adventure, to explore and learn about the world that they live in. The blooded past that she'd sail in that voyage is also the path that she charted. She accepted that now, and she'll carry that weight with her. All of it. It's why she wants to let her live. That is how she charts her own path. Ahab did not see this coming. Then we focus on the heart of the pallid whale, which had the golden bow within it. Ishmael grabbed her EGO, readied her aim and threw it at the heart of the pallid whale. Ishmael spoke of this as one bumpy voyage, telling everyone to hold on to something. She pulled at her harpoon, straining to pull out the heart of the hearts. Pulling with all her might, she felt like Queequeg was alongside her briefly. He told her to chart her own way, her path, that is her wish. This gave Ishmael the rest of the strength needed to complete what she just did, killing the pallid whale and robbing Ahab of that kill. Ishmael, she knew that she didn't want to be like her now. Certainly now that she knew better. That despite all of Ahab's mental tricks, despite all of her gaslighting and all of her other best efforts, she failed to make Ishmael like her, although at times she was perilously close to doing so. So while she failed, she did not fail miserably. Ishmael told Ahab to look at her and tell her that they're still one and the same. Ahab failed to comprehend this action. Well, she decided not to follow your script anymore, Ahab. She's thrown that out. Yes, thrown that out and was following one that she just wrote now. Ahab was still unable to handle Ishmael's deviation from her expectations, shouting at her that she should have stabbed her, that harpoon should have pierced her heart. How? Where was she the one to... This caused Ahab to snap, to lose what little grip on reality she had left, ordering her crew to find the pallid whale, her harpooners to tighten the ropes around their harpoons, the helmsman to set course for the whale, full sail, ordering her first mate to row to the pallid whale from which all evils of the world sprouts, the navigators to chart a course, even though it was clear that the pallid whale was now dying and her crew were dead, never to return. Ishmael would watch her live, because she's the proof of her wandering years, so that she may endlessly struggle against the devouring seas, the testament to her sins, her whale. Ahab saw it for what it was. Ishmael was showing a cruel mercy, the same kind of mercy that she showed others. She said no, she will not look down on her. She is Captain Ahab. Ooh, the receiving end of cruel mercy sucks, doesn't it? Then pale blood exploded from the gaping rupture in the whale's heart, as though the dead Pequod crew were raising a toast to victory. A drink to the pallid whale's death and the downfall of Captain Ahab. The voyage had come to an end. Then Heathcliff realized something. The whale wasn't letting them out, it was caving in on itself. Sinclair understood what she meant by destroying the heart and escaping, and Gregor realizing that she was full of lies to the end. By escaping, she didn't mean escaping the whale alive. Rutis understood that technically wasn't a lie. She just left out the detail that they'd eventually end up outside. Just not in one piece. Roger certainly realized that. Then a light appeared from above and a rope was lowered. It was large and sturdy. This caught Ishmael off guard. Dante wanted to know who dropped the rope. Roger didn't give a they should take it. Ishmael stared at the rope for a moment, a reminder of that moment in that whale, where Queequeg rescued her. Heathcliff was asking her, what was she waiting for? They need to get out of there! She saw the rope and she had a feeling that it wouldn't snap. Ahab telling her that she should have killed her. She should have been the one to kill the whale. Heathcliff asked, what about Ahab? Ishmael decided to let her watch as the pallid whale crumbled around her. The captain must go down with her ship. They then grabbed onto the rope and climbed. Just as Ishmael said, it didn't snap. The cool breeze was blowing in from the outside. They didn't look back at the abyss that was the whale. After a while, Rodia spoke of how the whale's hide was too thick and tough for most things to puncture, asking the Indigo Elder how he did it. He didn't mind the persistent and somewhat rude questioning. He patiently replied he didn't know if it was because the pallid whale swallowed a golden bar, or because it swallowed them, but its behaviors changed in ways that he'd never seen before, presuming that something went wrong with its brain. So he punctured a hole in it with his anchor, that's all. I suspect that it's because the heart was punctured and ripped out, which also weakened the hide of the pallid whale, just enough to make a hole in it. Virgilius then mentions that 2 of the 5 calamities of the Great Lake have met their end by his hand. Oh, you read. He killed the marlin whale, yes, but he can't take credit for killing the pallid whale. That was Ishmael's doing. She's the one who dealt the killing blow, not the Indigo Elder. Don't you like seeing the damned dozen doing something right for a change? Anyway, Virgilius asked the Indigo Elder if he'll remain there in the Great Lake, who asked, why would he leave? 3 calamities still remained. Virgilius understood. Then Sinclair noticed that butterfly, who took a moment to rest before fluttering over the lake's surface. Sinclair recognized it as the butterfly that they saw at the Lobotomy Corporation branch facility. Massault recognized it as the exact same butterfly. This made Honglu envious, to be able to cross that, well, the lake's unbound, so freely like that. Yes, this was clearly Rim, the distortion that can turn into a butterfly. Dante asking what Rim's deal was. He did help them out, or at least pointed them in the right direction. Faust noting that he had certain expectations of them. She expected him to return. This annoyed Heathcliff. He didn't like being a pawn in some dodgy bloke's game. Sinclair noting that Rim was likely watching them from a short distance away, maybe a step away. Ishmael's attention was focused beyond the lake's horizons rather than into its waters. Dante asks about that. Apparently Ishmael was reading the winds. Otis saw that they were cutting it close. The waves were likely to rush in their direction at any minute. This slightly amused Ishmael. She told them that they'd face it head on, asking Dante for confirmation. Dante didn't know how to sail. She didn't see it as mattering how good a sailor you were. What was important was to steer them right as the first mate of that ship. She'll trust and follow their directions. They're the captain now. At least for now. She'll go off on her own adventure in her skiff one day, but for now, she's tied to a bigger ship called Limbus Company, and because she wants to find out what's waiting for her at the end of that voyage, because they're the only friends she had left. Okay, with Heathcliff, that's probably stretching it. Dante wasn't sure what to think of this. Ishmael would trust their decisions and their orders, but she's not going to make the same mistakes of the past. She's not going to accept them blindly. If she sees fault in them, she'll question and try to understand them. When her compass no longer aligns with hers... yes, their compass no longer applies with hers. She'll take her skiff and sail away. She won't let anything consume her and make her lose herself again. She would follow her own path from that point onwards, just as Greekwig wanted her to do. Dante could see the waves rushing towards them from a distance. They were colossal, and it resulted in a little fear in Dante for valid reasons, yet Dante believed that they could manage it, which Ishmael briefly laughed at. Otis then announced that waves are incoming in 15 seconds, ordering Ishmael to get to the helm, calling her Swab, then correcting herself saying First Mate Ishmael, recognizing that she's returned to form after her deranged time from the mudflat scrapyards on the shore of the Great Lake until just before the pallid whale was killed. Ishmael reminded her that she's not even the captain. Then Charon, apologized for intruding. She had the helm, advising everyone to hold on, annoying Urtius along with Ishmael, as they knew how Charon's driving was on land. Taking the helm had little difference regarding that. It was a while since Ishmael sighed like that, but she did it there. She then tightly gripped a handle on the bus boat, her gaze fixed on the approaching waves. She would never allow herself to be swept up by the tempest that the waves would bring, physically or psychologically. Her hair, the color of sunset, flowing and fluttering in the wind, which felt nice to her, perfect to push them towards a new voyage. Charon then announced that it was a voyage to ice cream! Splish splash. The rope was added to the bus boat decor, the others going about their business. Ishmael content for the first time in, well, quite some time. Most of the others were relaxing, while Yisang had a bucket on standby in case he vomited. Ryushu was trying to train a seagull to operate a small bicycle on a tightrope, with Nassau using a device in one hand and holding one end of the tightrope on the other, all passing the time until the next mission, or at least the next meaningful event that was to come, whatever and whenever that might be. Meanwhile, near a floating structure, it was unclear what it was. It could be a port ship, or it could be something else entirely. But near this, Ahab was revealed to have survived the collapse of the pallid whale, and a boat appeared with Herman on board, remarking that it's a mess there, likely not just referring to the wreckage, but also the mind of what she found. Ahab asked if it was still not in her sights. Yes, I know, delusional. She saw that it couldn't be. They must continue their search. Comb every corner. Herman said sorry that the whale died, but she doesn't have to completely give up on life. She only lost a single whale. Ahab thought that she was pointing and jeering at Captain Ahab. Herman told her that there was more than one pallid whale, implying that while the pallid whale of their world was dead, others were still alive. Now this caught Captain Ahab's attention. Herman noticing that she has the broken mad woman's attention, she offered to help her kill that whale, and make sure that she's the one to finish it off this time. She could hunt every pallid whale in every world. All she required from her is her determination and conviction, asking if this was enough reason for her to come aboard her ship. Wanting that voyage to be a good one. Yeah, clearly the story isn't done with Ahab yet. Although I suspect it'll be some time before she reappears. Okay, let's talk about the source material. This chapter was loosely based on Moby Dick, or The Whale by Herman Melville. As for what character this chapter was themed around, Ishmael, in the source material, was a bloke, whom the story was in the perspective of, where the main story was narrated by that character in both cases. Where in the source material, Ishmael signed up for a whaling voyage, and he'd be the only survivor. In the game, Ishmael had a similar desire for vengeance, just towards Ahab, and despite Ahab's best efforts, she failed to make Ishmael like her. Starbuck in the source material was an intellectual and was willing to take down or kill Ahab when the hunt for the white whale was getting too dangerous and Ahab growing increasingly insane, but the crew didn't see this and his hands were tied. As for the Starbuck of the game, his balls clearly were bitten off, as by the time Ishmael caught up with him, he was little more than Ahab's yes man. Stubb, in the source material, was good-humoured, easy and careless in the source... Okay, I'm just repeating myself. In the source material, he was good-humoured, easy and careless, while in the game, he's bad-tempered. Craig in the source material was a tattooed Polynesian and a cannibal. He was neither one thing or the other as far as civilization was concerned. Both versions bonded with their respective Ishmael, while the source material version speaks like he does because, it's likely not his first language. In the game version, it's because of assisted brain damage and tongue mutilation. As in, she paid someone to do that. Pip in the source material was an African-American youth and a slave, seen as the most insignificant of the Pequod's crew, described as over-tender-hearted. There's one event that happened in both versions. In the source material, when Stubb was injured, Pip was reassigned as the oarsman. In the game, Pip was chosen to be the oarsman, and that resulted in Stubb being bitten and then slowly transforming into a mermaid. While he was considered mad to the sailors in the source material, in the game, he actually was mad. We can thank Captain Ahab for that one. Ahab was a tyrannical captain in the source material who lost a leg when hunting Moby Dick, the white whale, which was actually a sperm whale. They typically ate squid. The teeth were mostly used by aggressive males. Obsession and autocracy were his trademarks, where his obsession for vengeance ultimately destroyed him. In fact, this was also referenced in the movie Star Trek First Contacts. Yes, it ultimately destroyed him, taking all but Ishmael with him. While both versions demanded loyalty from their crew, and had a fixation with hunting down a white whale, the game version was even worse than the source material, as she used tactics like gaslighting her crew into thinking that it was all their fault, or straight up murdering her crew, simply because it would be what would make it more convenient for her. I mean, she even makes Chroma of the Hammer and Nail N-Corp's Psycho Division look like the picture of mental health by comparison, and that's quite a statement. Not to mention an achievement. She even turned those that are practically sane into following her insanity, and when she killed them, she sometimes even laughed about it. And in her case, she didn't even need drugged rations to subvert their wills. This was due to her charismatic and hypnotic tone. As for the other story referenced in this chapter, it's Peter Pan, where the Twin Hook pirates are a reference to the pirates in that story. While Captain Hook wasn't seen as he was drunk on mermaid wine, like the fermented mermaid drink, and it's just as well as he'd likely be triggered by Dante's ticking, due to a clock in the source material alerting Captain Hook to the presence of a crocodile that ate his hand after Peter Pan cut it off. As for Smee, in the source material, Smee is his first mate that sucks at being evil. In the game, first met Smee, she was actually quite competent at being evil, considering that she moved to kidnappings and ransoms to generate an illicit income. As for what Peter Pan is like in this game setting, I'm thinking probably someone emotionally immature and ultra-violent. As for Tinkerbell, possibly a robot assistant that resembles a fairy, where as long as the intelligence isn't human level, it's not illegal. Either that or some deranged dwarf. Okay, as for the Divine Comedy, this might be a reference to the sixth circle of hell. The one reserved for heretics, where some are trapped in flaming tombs. Okay, this might be a loose reference, but this might be a reference to the skin prophets. The aberration of the skin prophecy. As that abnormality burns. It might also be a reference to the fifth circle of wrath, which involves the wrathful fighting in the slimy waters that came from the river Styx, where they would fight each other from beneath the water in choking rage. Well, the mermaids are certainly more focused on choking the life out of those that aren't mermaids, but they've certainly lost who they were. Let's talk about the other things that can be derived from this. Rim is the distortion that wasn't just a member of the Circle of Nine in the past, as in one of Yi Sang's former associates, who left after Dong Rang sold them out to T-Core, and he likely listened to Carmen, which was why he distorted into a form that he's in now. He can travel anywhere he wanted in butterfly form. He's now associated with Demian, a powerful being that bisected Chroma with a flicker of his wrist. They're both part of a faction that has an interest in events, certainly in Dante, and possibly Sinclair, with N-Corp's Circle of Nine as well. As for the abnormalities, the Ambling Pearl is likely a reference to Ahab's capacity to spout out psychological poison to subvert the will of others, and the pearl represents her capacity to believe her own delusions, specifically about her purpose, where without it, she's lost. It could also be a reference to Queequeg, as she felt that she was living in filth when she was part of the middle, filth being defined as the slime that the Ambling Pearl spits out and it eats to take back, much like she was forced back into the middle while she bore their brand. Her life had more meaning when she met Ishmael, which was represented by the pearl. The Skin Prophet is likely a reference to Ahab's obsession with destiny, specifically her destiny to kill the pallid whale. It also represents a desire for destruction, Ahab for the pallid whale, Ishmael for Ahab, which can harm others as a consequence, such as pummeling Heathcliff in Chapter 4.5, wounding Dante at the Marlin Club, almost getting them killed when she provoked Ahab on sight, when they first arrived at Pequod Town. In Ahab's case, it's because she uses most of her crew as test subjects to make sure that she's going down the path that is safe for her and those that aren't as discardable. Then we have the dream-devouring silk current. That's another that applies to Ahab and Ishmael, as like them, it destroys the focus of their rage, obsessing over them, not caring about why, just that it's the focal point of destruction for them, which can also backfire. Ahab barely realized, if at all, that she became what she once desired to fight against. It was even reflected in her gas harpoon egio, which not only stopped the palidification from eating her completely and fully transforming her into a mermaid, it made her immune to full palidification. It also loosely resembled the arm of a claw, although instead of injecting compounds K, R, and W, it injected souls. When the pallid whale was killed by Ishmael and she was spared, that broke her will, and she lost what little coherence she had left. But in the end, she wasn't much different from her crew that she manipulated into following her insanity, as she was drifting without purpose, like them. And she jumped at Herman's offer to come with her, with the possibility that she could hunt down padded whales in other worlds. Well, with the glass window technology, that is within possibility. Although, let's be honest, Herman more likely wanted to recruit her for Encore, possibly as a member of the Circle of Nine at best, and a discardable asset at worst. Well, what comes around goes around. Herman was likely waiting for Ahab to appear out of the pallid whale, as she certainly knew what she wanted and that it wasn't her that killed the pallid whale. She said, yeah, let's just say that she knows more than she's saying. Sonia was more loose ally. Gubo and Azia were confirmed members, and Jie Huan was just an N-Corp affiliate, who was also Honglu's older brother. They don't have the closest relationship, well, more so Jie Huan than Honglu. So far, there are 3 factions that have an interest in the Golden Bars: Limbus Company, N-Corp, and those that have some connection to Demian. It'll be interesting to find out how this will continue, although it's hinted by Rim that Yongji is still alive, so he and the other surviving members of the Circle of Nine, the original one, might appear at some point in the future. There's a wait for the long journey back to the mainland, but that would be covered here. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!